Đức Bổn Sư Bụt Sakyamuni. Con kính bạch sư ông. Con kính thưa toàn thể đại chúng. Đại chúng có khỏe không? Đại chúng có vui không? Sáng hôm nay, đại chúng của tu viện Lộc Uyển, nhất là quý sư cô, quý thiền sinh của xóm Trong Sáng, mở đầu một ngày mới bằng những bước chân đi lên thiền đường để ngồi thiền, trong tiếng chuông đại hồng, trong tiếng hô chuông của một sư cô. Và con cảm nhận con không cần đi lên cõi cực lạc hay cõi nào hết.
Dear Buddhaya, dear beloved Thầy, dear Sangha, how are you doing? Are you well? Are you happy? This morning, the Deer Park Sangha, especially the sisters and the lay friends staying in the Clarity Hamlet, began the new day with our mindful steps going to the Ocean of Peace meditation hall. We walked with the sounds of chanting of a sister, and I feel I don't need to go to the Pure Land or anywhere. It was something inexpressible. It was such deep peace that we could experience step by step. We could experience peace and taste peace. And I'm so grateful to the sister who invited. As we listen to the temple bell and the chanting, we send the energy to all the species around here. We begin the new day with something wholesome and beautiful. Dear Sangha, please sit stably. Sit as a mountain. And I will read to you a message from our teacher. And Sister Nghiem will read it in English. Let us enjoy each message sent to us by our beloved teacher. Message. A poem written by Zen Master Thích Nhất Hạnh, our teacher. Life has left her footprints on my forehead, but I have become a child again this morning. The smile seen through leaves and flowers is back to smooth away the wrinkles as the rain wipes away footprints on the beach. Again, a cycle of birth and death begins. I walk firmly. I walk on thorns, but firmly. As among flowers, I keep my head high. Rhymes bloom among the sounds of bombs and mortars. The tears I shed yesterday have become rain. I feel calm, hearing its sounds on a thatched roof. Childhood, oh, my birthland is calling me, and the rain melts my despair. I am still alive, able to smile quietly. The sweet fruit brought forth by the tree of suffering, carrying the dead body of my brother, I go across the rice field in the darkness. Earth will keep you tight within her arms, dear one, so that tomorrow you will be transformed into flowers. This flower smiling quietly in this morning field. This moment you will weep no more, dear one. We have gone through the deep of a night. This morning, yes, this morning I kneel down on the green grass and I notice your presence. Oh, flowers that speak to me in silence, the message of love and understanding has indeed come. Dear beloved community, this poem our teacher wrote in this book, Love in Action, in 1999. It was published. Speaking about what has taken place in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. This book is about that, and Thầy also wrote that on the foundation with the question, what can we do differently besides using war to solve the issue? What can we do to change the society in the spirit of nonviolence? What can we do differently so that we may take refuge in Mother Earth so that she can help us to transform hatred and violence, to turn them into flowers. This was the message that Thầy sent everywhere since 1953. And today is already 2021. 28 years have passed, and we look back. It seems that the society nowadays, right in the US, even though we don't have a war, but the war takes place in each one of us, in our mind, in our daily life, in our behavior, treatment towards our loved ones, our co-workers, friends, and the consequences of war are still there. The soldiers, the survivors of war became disabled in body and in mind, wounds that could not heal in their own mind, in their own heart, wounds that we call as PTSD from the war. The consequences of war are still carried in each one of us, even though we say that we have won the war. The war doesn't solve anything. Only love can speak the voice of strength. I remember in 1968, I was 12 years old then. I was a child. And on the first day of the new year, I went to a temple called Kim Sơn, Golden Mountain, and I took my younger brother to the temple with me. And the communists, what we call them as the communists, and then the republics, the soldiers from the republic, the South that sided with the Americans. So they were fighting with each other. I was only 12 years old, and I had to carry my brother, who was 8 years old, but he was very chubby. I could hardly stand up when he was on my back, and yet I tried to carry him on my back. And on my one hand, I was holding my younger sister's hand. That's Brother Fabrice's mother. And we were running across the train rail. And we were going in that direction. There were many rocks, and it was difficult, but it was the shortest path for us. And here I was carrying this brother on my back and holding my younger sister's hand, and we were running, trying to get her home, to my grandmother's home. So I was a witness of the war. That memory, that incident is still very alive in me. That trauma is still very much alive in me. And then in 1975, when I was 19 years old, and I was a nurse, because in 1975, the south of Saigon fell, and the southern soldiers, the wounded ones, we went to, the young nurses went to take care of them. Here I was only 19 years old, but I was taking care of them since the morning to the evening. And in the hospital, the wounded soldiers were all over the place. There were those, their bodies were severed, their legs were amputated, and there were open sores, open wounds, there were maggots, there were flies that I had to pick the maggots out of their wounds, clean their wounds from morning to evening. And there was not even a place on the ground to walk, because the soldiers were lying all over the floor, and they kept calling, nurse, please help us, please help us. I even had to pick the maggots out of the men's private areas. I had to pick the maggots out of that. Life teaches you many lessons. And over the years, today I'm sitting here in front of you to share with you the message from our beloved teacher is still echoing. And those of us who are sitting here listening to my sharing, either in this meditation hall or from home, we are the sincere practitioners. We want to change ourselves, because we have to begin from ourselves. Only when we change, transform, and to have the right view, have the insight about inter-being, only then can we carry the wholesome, beautiful way of life, of love, so that we can manifest love as love in action. So love can manifest in the most beautiful way. I would like to invite the community to come back, to learn and understand again the 5 mindfulness trainings. The 5 mindfulness trainings, it means the 5 concrete ways of practicing mindfulness, the way that reflects the Noble Eightfold Path, the path of understanding and love that can bring about healing, transformation, and happiness for ourselves and for the world. The 5 mindfulness trainings carry the insight of interbeing, that is right view, that has the capacity to dissolve the fanaticism, dogmatism, hatred, violence, and fear, living and practicing in the spirit of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Then we can go in the path, on the path of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. These 5 mindfulness trainings represent the insight of Buddhism about a global ethics. knowing that we are walking on the path of the Buddha, we have no reason to worry about the future or to fear about the future or the last 3 weeks.
mùa an cư kiết đông và rất nhiều các bạn thiền sinh về tu học.
We have been in the 3-month retreat, and we have many lay friends coming to practice with us. Each Friday, we greet new friends and we say goodbye to a few friends. And we have friends who stay with us for 3 months, 2 months, or 1 month. And each time when we have the community gathering, and before the friends leave, the young people or those who are young at heart, every face, when they share, they look so sincere. They are so inspirational and moving. We see that even after staying at the monastery for 1 week, they really flower. And those of us who have lived in the monastery for so many years, we've witnessed these flowers blooming in their faces again and again. When we see people feeling so grateful for the chance to practice, and we feel fulfilled, fed again and again, and our hearts are full of gratitude. We're grateful that we have the practice. We are grateful because we have the very concrete practices of mindfulness, and we have a wholesome environment that all of us can take refuge in. And that is why the first steps, our very first steps, those of us who have received the 5 mindfulness trainings, those of us who have received the 14 mindfulness trainings, the monks have received 248 trainings, or the nuns 250 and 348 trainings for the fully ordained monks and nuns. But still, the 5 mindfulness trainings are the foundation for all of our precepts. And thanks to these precepts that we see clearly, each one of us needs to come back to ourselves to change our way of thinking, of living, so that our life can go in the direction, what we call as of the direction of love and understanding. So in the 5 mindfulness trainings, the first one is protecting life. Dear community, I cannot read all these trainings out loud, but you can find them. You can find them online. You can find them in our books. And in a little while, we will also recite the 14 trainings. But we all, outside of the meditation hall, we also have a bulletin board that we have the 5 mindfulness trainings. So please look for them and read and learn more about them. The first mindfulness training is about reverence for life. One time, Thầy advised us, I think it was in 2007, Thầy said, let us not eat dairy product anymore. Because when we make cheese, for example, we have to raise the cows, and the ranches, they cause a lot of pollution to the water and the air. And we should also encourage everybody to eat less meat, every week you eat at least 1 or 2 or 3 days where you don't eat, when you don't eat meat, so that the number of cows, of animals being killed can decrease. That is concrete love. That is love in action. Because if you do not decrease the meat consumption, then the pollution of the environment will increase. With time, we will not have the earth for our future generations. So we have to begin with small steps like that. My little niece, when she saw, and when she was in the market, when she saw the crabs, when she saw people pointing at the crabs to pick them to buy the lobsters, she said, "What's that?" And her mother said, "Oh, people will buy and cook them." And she said, "Oh, but they will cry when they are being cooked." So if you remember that the lobsters, they cry when they are being boiled, or the chicken, they cry when they suffer when they are killed, or the cows, that when all these cries, these hormones secreted in their bloodstream will go directly to our body. And so their fear, their sadness will become our own fear and sadness, because we consume that piece of meat, because when we eat that piece of the beef, that is the cow that is being killed. The pets that we have, that we love so much, but if we let them eat from the flesh and bones of those animals that get killed, and they can also become violent and sometimes very aggressive, and they can also scratch and tear their own owners. And so we are what we consume. We become what we consume. I speak simply the image. So we see the need to decrease the amount of meat consumption. We see that more and more. We have more people going to schools, going to supermarkets, and people go there with their guns and shoot people randomly. We know it also begins from their own mental crisis, from coming back from the war, or growing up in a violent environment. All of this, it's rooted in our own life. So we need time to look deeply, to reflect what has become of us, of our society. When people use animals for decoration for interior decoration, like we use the tusk of the elephant. People use guns to take down these animals. People who like to wear jewelries from the animals. And when these animals become so frightened, researchers have said that there are elephants that are born without a tusk anymore, so they don't have to be killed. So this is something, these are the things that we see, that violence, the hatred, these problems. We need to learn more, to research, so that we can practice better reverence for life. The second mindfulness training is about true happiness. If we live in our life, we see that our happiness doesn't come from fame or power, or the superficial material wealth. But we see that happiness comes from our simple living, moderate living.
bảo hộ được cho cái phần
Then we can protect
và tâm hồn của mình
protect our body and our mind better, because we do not need to work so hard to enslave ourselves in order to have enough money to consume those things. There are those who don't have a job,
mình không phát hiện
but we work so hard to consume, to buy things, and yet we don't have time for our children, for our family. So true happiness.
không đòi hỏi
So when we find our true happiness, we have so much to give others. We don't need to take away from others. So the second mindfulness training about true happiness, we see that it's very profound. We don't take away from others, and yet we offer. If the companies, not because of their own profit, then the companies would find ways not to release toxins into rivers and oceans, into the land that will pollute the environment. And human beings, we become sickened by all these toxins. Sisters from Vietnam, in south of Vietnam, at the temple Tam Tích. So we have a nunnery there, and the sisters live nearby a pig farm, and they pollute the water. The water becomes black, and they have to smell of that polluted air and to hear the cries of the pigs day by day. Do these farmers have true happiness? They cannot bring that money with them on their deathbed. So we need to re-examine this. The third precept is about true love.
trong xóm của chúng con có rất là nhiều người trẻ và các em về tu học.
Clarity Hamlet at the moment has many young people, young women. Some of them are in their teenage years, just finishing high school. And we are like the elder sisters, they are the mothers guiding these young women, because the young people are our future. They will go forward. We do our best to help them, to show them what is true love for ourselves, that we do not need to seek in the praise from others and who say that they love us. The young people learn to live in an awakened way. They know how to breathe so that they have peace. They take steps with stability. They don't need to look back and forth to look for acknowledgement, recognition from people of the opposite sex. So these are the moments that the young people are training to become a young woman who know how to be in control of themselves, to be their own soulmates, and they are not trapped by others, because nowadays there are those who are out there to hunt young people, even children at the age of 8 or 9. They persuade young children to take pictures of themselves naked or inappropriate ways, and then they would put online. Well, that's like human trafficking. They groom these young people and then spoil their lives because of some come back. So it ruins these young people's lives just because of a few sweet words. So We learn to get to know somebody, not just the person superficially, but the person's whole life, the person's parents and ancestors. Only then that's true love, that we know the history of a person. Otherwise, so was a young person. So there was this young person who said this: when I look at a woman, I look from the top to the bottom. I look at her body parts with craving, with judgment. So that is a sick mind, a mind that is sick. When we look at a person, you need to see the beauty, the wholesomeness in a person, not a look to possess. And that is why young people, I very much hope the young people and their parents try to help your children, your grandchildren, help them to learn to respect their own bodies. It is the temple, a spiritual temple. Our bodies are our own spiritual temples. Only when we know how to respect our own body, that others, and only when others respect us, respect our body, that they can truly love us. Otherwise, they just use their sweet words to groom us, and then they will abandon us and cause a lot of suffering. And so when young people come to us, we try to train them to learn to love themselves with a life of mindfulness. Don't think that that person can love us with gifts or with sweet words or with the flowers that they give us. So we just finished the first, second, and the third training. Now we go on to the fourth training about deep listening and loving speech. When we have some time, do we ever have time to sit still, to look back and hear words that we have spoken in the past days, or in this morning, or it just happened? Have we listened to our own speech, our own words? Sometimes we listen and think, oh, I wish if I had mindfulness, if I had been calmer, if my mind was so spacious, I would not have said those things. And when we can hear ourselves, listen to ourselves, then only then we can be truly present for somebody else when that person is speaking to us. When we listen to ourselves, then we know right in that moment there are things that we want to listen, and there are things that we don't need to listen, that we need to withdraw to protect ourselves. Do we need to listen to the music that are loud, that are triggering? Do we need to listen to things that always that disturb our mind? Or we can choose to listen to the wind blowing, to the water flowing, trickling. Have you ever listened to the sound of a leaf falling? These are the things that can nourish us so much. When I drive and I hear the cars around me turning on the music very loudly, I feel it's not very peaceful. But if each person lessons creates less the uneasiness for people around us, if each person can contribute the quietness or the peaceful sounds like the sounds of the temple bell or the sounds of chanting, then that we collectively can make life more beautiful. And so when we learn to listen to ourselves, then we can listen to others and we can listen to the suffering of others even if they are not speaking it out loud, because we are much more sensitive and we are not so indifferent. Life requires us to have the art of living. And only when we practice mindfulness, when we practice the 5 mindfulness trainings and 14 trainings, when we are very sincere in our practice, these things make us beautiful and more wholesome, and it helps us to manifest our love. Love in action can, and we will not cause each other suffering. Not because a few months ago we said that we love each other so deeply, but then we argue and then we tear the family apart, and then our children suffer all the consequences. So these are the things that we need to train ourselves. Now I will go to the 5th mindfulness training. Let us breathe with the sound of the bell. In front of me is a eucalyptus, is an eucalyptus tree, and there's a mountain range. I nourish myself with beautiful images. I remember in 2004 or 2005, Ron and Laura planted a tree. They wanted to plant a tree so that when our teacher gives a Dharma talk, can see a beautiful tree in front of him. And the tree can provide a beautiful image, but it would not cover our vision of the mountains behind it. And the truth is that 17 years later, I still feel that the spaciousness of the sky in front of me. It is that immensity, spaciousness, that gives our heart a sense of calm and lightness and ease. Last Friday, I had a chance to sit with the lay friends in Clarity Hamlet. There are 10 of us in the group. So there are those who are young and who are young at hearts in our group, and we were very happy sitting together. A woman said this: today, I follow your footsteps. I walk behind you and follow your footsteps, and I felt it was something. It was a true presence.
Tôi nói nhiều lắm. Nhưng mà
She spoke at length.
cái con kể lại để thấy rằng mỗi một chúng ta, nếu chúng ta biết nuôi dưỡng chính
I want to share that each one of us, when we know how to nourish ourselves with the practice, with our mindful steps, what I call
cái bước chân
as
của tình thương, của trị liệu,
the steps of love, of healing,
bước chân
of
nói rằng là
each step that we
những bước chân mà mình
can call here and now, the steps that have no thoughts in the head. We only walk with ease and lightness and freedom. That is a nourishment.
mỗi từng người
And in that circle,
ai cũng
each person shared for 3 minutes, and everybody talked about the nourishment and healing. Somebody even said, Deer Park is so vast. Each day when we walk to the meditation hall, a few times I could hardly walk, she said. But when we were sharing afterwards, and the woman, because she was older, she said, I know it's difficult to walk up and down, but I promise that I will train my steps so I'm able to enjoy every step here, because at home we don't have that space. We just walk within the confine of our home. But here at the monastery, the road may be windy, up and down, but our mind doesn't roam far because our mind has to be present to know where we're walking and that we're walking. So that is nourishment, that is healing, when our mind is in the here and the now. And in the fifth mindfulness training about nourishment and healing, we see very clearly that society nowadays, there are many people running away, hiding from their suffering, hiding from our crisis. We borrow alcohol, we psychedelics, we borrow many painkillers and other toxins, things. So I read about this. I myself never tried those things, but people use pornography, things that are destructive to our own mind, and our life becomes sick. But if we are fortunate, we practice and we have wholesome friends, we come back to a place like a practice center here in Deer Park, then we will make the aspiration, the vow to let go of all that unhealthy consumption. We promise to ourselves that we will transform our own way of living so that our life can be more beautiful, more wholesome, and more peaceful. Otherwise, we will be full of fear, full of anxiety, and we do not dare to confront our own life, and we become so confused. When a young man or a young woman doesn't have control of their own, of themselves, then that fear and confusion can push them into many traps. And so out there are so many traps. We need to be careful. This world, the movies, the news, we may think that we allow the children to play the electronic games and the images of people holding guns, even though they are animated characters. But if they consume those images and sounds, even though they are virtual, but they are planted in the minds of the children, of the young people. When I was little, I was not exposed to that much. I didn't understood what was a machine gun. And then at some point, when I was a little older, I saw the image of the soldier sitting on the helicopter, and they had carried this very long gun with all of these grenades, uh, and they point down from the helicopter, and they only need to pull the trigger, and many people below can be killed. That didn't just happen in the movies, but it really took place in wartime. Do we need to consume those images? We need to expose our children to those images in the movie, and they get used to those images. And when later, when they get really angry, and then when it becomes too much for them, they will go get a gun and then hurt themselves and others. They buy guns or they get guns from somebody, whether intentional or unintentional, but a life is taken. Many lives are taken. And so, nourishment and healing in this fifth mindfulness training is far reaching. We see that there are small actions. We think that in the public places, we use the restrooms, we can get the paper, and we can wipe our hands, or we wipe our face, or even our feet. That's a business. And we just take 3, 4, 5 pieces of paper. But when we take that much of paper, we think, oh, it's in public place, it's not my money, I can just use as much as I want. But when we consume like that, if we remember that's from trees, even if they are recycled, the paper is still from tree. And the forests leads to deforestation. So in our actions daily, we learn to be more aware, and that can treat our indifference, our mindlessness. It can help us to become more sensitive to the suffering in ourselves, in our loved ones, and those around us. We may think that on Valentine's Day, we can buy roses that are very beautiful, very fresh, and very expensive to give to our loved ones. We think that nourishes our love, but when we have time, we look deeply, we see that in order to have those fresh roses, sometimes there are cars, the cooler, the trucks that has coolers inside, they travel at length, or the planes have to carry them from a very distant country. It takes so much work, costs so much carbon footprint, so that the rose can get to you, to your loved ones. And so people say that on a Valentine's Day, for the roses to get to your loved ones, they go through so much. That's a lot of high cost, and that contributes to climate change, to global warming. I never give roses to anybody, but if I love somebody, I will say on that day, I will do my best to be present for that person. We can bow deeply to that person, to recognize the presence of that person, and then we will hug that person very deeply. And that is even more beautiful than the roses. Dear community, we have very concrete, pragmatic practices. We have the 5 mindfulness trainings that we can look deeply into, we can learn. But just researching, reading them, that's not enough. We need to practice them moment to moment, day after day, year after year. We continue on our path of practice so that each of our steps can carry the message of love, can be love in action. We can manifest our love concretely. We are the messenger of love, and we are ourselves is a living message. When we eat, and we can eat mindfully, peacefully, so that we can enjoy the food that has arrived to us. Is that not an act of nourishment and healing? Isn't that a message of love? I see that we have done it. We will continue to do that. And we want to live that way sincerely. We want to carry the message of love. We want to manifest our love in our daily life. And we have to be the example so that our children and grandchildren, friends, and so that when they look at us, they know, then they see a way. I walk stably on my feet. My eyes are wide open. Happiness is not my own happiness because I know how to love myself, that I know everyone. So this is all love in action, dear community. So thank you for your deep listening.